This is the Observations Podcast for Sunday, the 15th of September, 2024. Welcome back to the podcast. I'm Dale Franks.
Michael Wade.
I had a completely different podcast planned for today until the news hit just, a couple hours ago now at this point, that there was yet another assassination attempt, although wildly unsuccessful and foiled apparently by the Secret Service just ahead of time, in Florida today. So I'm not, that's two in 2 months. And I guess we can quickly cover the facts. Michael, oh, by the way, good to see you again, Michael. Hi. We haven't talked since last week, so
not really.
We've texted, but we haven't actually talked. And we had the debate, and we had all this other stuff, all of which is pretty much gone out the window at this point. The story being that there was a guy at Trump's golf course. Trump was playing down here at the Trump West Palm Beach golf course. Secret Service man saw a rifle sticking through the fence line. He opened fire. The guy behind the rifle decided to skedaddle. He started to head north on I-95, got picked up in the next county over by the sheriff's department. This is the fella, 58-year-old Ryan Routh of Hawaii, a fellow with, shall we say, eclectic political opinions. Because we do have access, or at least we did, and people downloaded his socials before they managed to get around to getting rid of them. There they are, taking the evidence from the fence line. There's the car stop where they got the guy. There is, and here's where he was over here. Right by hole 6. Trump was still on hole 5. Secret Service agent had gone around to advance hole 6 just to check it out. That's when he saw the guy and opened fire on him. More on the shooter as well. As we said, he was ID'd as a guy named Ryan Routh. He's 58 years old. He's from Hawaii. We saw him. We saw that. We also saw this. Keep this in mind. This fella, he must, I don't know that he works out, but he certainly keeps up with his cardio. That fella's in shape, which is kind of odd because I saw down here at the bottom of this story about him. This is the sniper's nest as it was in C2 whenever they found it. Apparently he had ceramic plates, which I assume to mean body armor, in these two bags that were up there, and he was firing between the two bags. So, I mean, he certainly came with some preparation. Big pro Ukraine guy, big pro Taiwan guy, which is okay, I guess. A big supporter of Vivek Ramaswamy and Nikki Haley. So that's interesting. He was also a supporter of Bernie Sanders, apparently, a couple of years ago. He says that he visited Kiev and would be willing to fight on the front lines if he were permitted to. You can believe as much of that as you please. I mean, the fellow looks like he's in decent enough shape. I think that the Ukrainians, if he had volunteered, would have probably snapped him up in a hot second and sent him into the meat grinder without too much argument.
Probably not.
So that's the facts. You can get that anywhere. You don't need me to get any more in detail on that. Here's what I think is more interesting. This was published, it's an opinion piece published by some guy in the Baltimore Sun. I don't really care about this guy from Finksburg, Maryland, but he does write a couple of interesting things. He goes through and talks about the kind of stuff that Democrats are saying about Donald Trump. We get to decide, in November, Americans will get to decide if we will continue to be the United States of America. Some down here, it successfully programmed its followers to hear Nazi and Hitler. He has been called a fascist. He's been called a Russian agent, a friend of Vladimir Putin. Of course, we also have the right-wing MAGA extremists, the radical right-wing Christian nationalist hate groups, and all this stuff. And what's her name today? And I want to go to it. I didn't prep this up, but happily I responded to it, so I can find it pretty easily in my replies. This from Jennifer Rubin. Fortunately, it may be that the only shots were fired by the Secret Service, but the whole climate and normalization of violence is horrific. Okay, well, who's created this climate? As I said, I wonder if constantly telling people that a candidate is a foreign agent and also the second coming of Hitler contributes in any way to that whole climate and normalization of violence.
I'm not going to disagree with you. That's. I mean, this is the same thing. The climate of fear that cast its pall over Dallas when JFK was there. The same thing about the crosshairs from Palin, and that's what got Abby, whatever her name
Gabby
is.
Giffords.
Gabby Giffords. But they certainly don't seem to believe that's the case when it comes to their rhetoric. I mean,
yeah, our rhetoric is all normal and factual, and we're telling you exactly
with these secret message.
Yeah,
the bell whistle.
Yeah, it's all the people on the other side who are talking in dog whistles. We would never do that.
Mm-hmm. Right. And yet, great. 2 assassination attempts, and he's not even elected yet.
At least we're fortunate that we caught this guy. We know who
True.
he is. He's alive. He can talk so far. And, whether Jack Ruby will appear out of the garage when they transfer him from county to federal custody, we'll wait to see if that happens. But 2 times in a single election is a big deal.
Especially given just how hard it is to get close to these people in the first place. We do have some skills in that area now. Or at least how hard it should be.
Yeah, well, I think you're confusing with the world that should be. Yeah. Apparently with the world that is. Apparently.
At least it was at one point. I realized it had gotten so decayed.
Yeah, so I don't know how you would expect anything. This is one of the, we talk about the political polarization of our country, which is, really a polite way of saying that we live in 2 different realities. And there are people on one side who live in a reality where Donald Trump is the second coming of Adolf Hitler. And if he gets reelected, then, as Joe Biden said, all the shackles will be off. How? But it doesn't matter. The shackles will be off. Nothing, like the Archduke Franz Ferdinand in that famous Onion story. No man can stop me. A, we have entire institutions that would stop you. B, you were president once, or he was president once, and he left. He didn't attend the inauguration because, he's a spiteful little child, but he did leave. He didn't stick around. He didn't become a dictator. And I don't think that he will stick around and become a dictator this time. But all of the talk, like the thing that he said, and look, he's not his own best messenger sometime, but the thing that he said this last week, something to the effect of, after I get elected, we're going to go find all of those people who were involved in election cheating in 2020, and we're going to prosecute them to the fullest extent of the law. Oh, and we're going to deport everybody that we possibly can. That was somehow twisted into, see, he'll become a dictator. He says he's going to throw people in jail. That's not what he said. He said we'd prosecute people involved in, any election
And cheating.
fraud.
Yeah,
In
any election
fraud.
cheating.
Any election cheating. If you think that means he's going to round up Democrats wholesale, I would suggest that perhaps there's a rational reason for doing so.
Maybe go speak to your presidential candidate about Venn diagrams and how this works.
Yeah. If you were going to constantly call this guy such a danger to the republic, well, aren't you the ones who are raising the climate of violence? Aren't you the ones who are promoting this, what are apparently so far unhinged individuals to go after the president?
Yeah, literally fomenting hate.
Yeah, and then saying it's Donald Trump. He's fomenting all this hate.
Mm-hmm.
Well, look, even if I were to agree, arguendo, that Donald Trump is fomenting hate against, say, illegal immigrants, even if I grant you that, just purely for argument's sake, that does not absolve you of your responsibility to maintain a civil tone in policy disagreements. That's just become impossible.
And let's face it, we don't really have policy disagreements anymore. We don't
No.
even agree on the same goals. So, I mean, it used to be, yeah, we wanted this specific goal and we'd argue about how to best accomplish that. Now it's, well, no, we want that. No, that's really bad. We want this. We're just at cross purposes all the time.
What we have lost in this country is a general agreement on what the goals of the country should be and what the goals of our politics should be. We used to fight over means, but we were largely agreed on what the end goal was. Now, for the left, the end goals that they want are comprehensible. I mean, they're certainly understandable. They are just not traditionally the goals that this country has striven for.
And they're generally incredibly expensive goals and if you never look at the trade-offs, you're not going to be able to really weigh in the balance whether or not that's a worthwhile endeavor. I mean, it's just wish casting all the time.
Well, it's utopianism. One of the things that both American parties used to have in mind, as radically different as their means may have been, was not this. Well, look, it's Marxism. It's communism. The Democrats have devolved into an explicitly Marxist party, in my view, and their goals are Marxist goals, which are in many ways completely antithetical to everything the American experiment was supposed to be about.
Correct. Yeah.
And we are now, I think we're facing an election that, and I always hate hearing this, every election is so consequential. And look, to a certain extent, they all are. I mean, to a certain extent, all elections are, existential conflicts in some small way. This one, I think, is existential. I think this is going to be a referendum, even though so many people don't realize that this is the referendum we're having. I think this is going to be a referendum on whether we are going to be a free country or whether we are going to be a Marxist state.
Or whether we're going to be one country or two countries.
Well, see, that's the other problem. I'm not entirely sure that there will be another United States federal election after this one.
Yeah.
Or to the extent that there will be, it will be two different federal elections for two different countries.
Yeah. I mean, it just seems that the sides are so far apart. Now, it's hard to tell just how much of this is roiling up, everyday people at the grassroots level, and how much is still kind of at the rah rah, second tier level of influencers and pollsters and bloggers and whatever else. Because it seems like both sides, right and left, are telling themselves a lot of fantasies about how well everything is going. But I don't get the feeling that people, they don't like the candidates. Most people seem to vote with their pocketbooks. I mean, in a lot of ways, things haven't changed. I don't think on the ground, but there's no talking amongst the sides as far as leadership goes, because they just howl at each other.
Well, look, we have seen at least some change in what the election looks like. If you look at the electoral map, just looking at, and Real Clear Politics has a very simple way of doing this. It's not sophisticated. It has proven to be relatively accurate over the last, I guess, 4 election cycles. But basically what they do is they just take an average of all the polls, and if you are up by 0.1%, they assign the electoral college votes for that state to you. And so over the last week, since the debate, which I hope we'll get a chance to talk about up here in a few minutes, but after the debate, Pennsylvania and Nevada switched from red back to blue. With Nevada, it's almost a 1-point lead in the polling averages. In Pennsylvania, it's 0.1%. And again, it's just an average of all the polls. So, a more recent poll can throw off the average, or an outlier poll can throw off the average. And 0.1%, I think, is so neck and neck as to not really tell you much. I think if you go to, and let's do it again here, we'll just go to Real Clear Politics and we'll look at them with their toss-ups. So give me a second for the screen to show up. So this is what it's looking like if you throw in toss-up states. So the no toss-ups is just whoever happens to be ahead. So we're looking at basically a neck and neck election. I believe a couple of things are true. First, I believe that this should be the most winnable election for a Republican candidate since 1984. Second, I believe that if any other Republican than Donald Trump was the nominee, it would be.
Yeah, I think it would be over right now.
And the fact that it's not, I think, is an indication largely of the weakness that Donald Trump has, certainly with women on all sides of the political spectrum and with undecided voters. He's not a popular fella. And Kamala Harris, and look, Kamala Harris isn't popular either, or at least she wouldn't be if people would get to know her. But the press is, and her campaign, and the press is happily playing along with it, her campaign is ensuring that voters don't get to know her.
Right. And they don't have any plans anyway. It's just more of the same, while saying, this is change you can believe in. It's like, you're the sitting vice president.
Yeah, change from what? Change from you to you? And that's good. Well, change from Joe to you. Although, those who think that Joe Biden is still the president of the United States.
Joe may be the only one.
I admire your childlike faith in the system. I'll just put it that way. I do have the sense that this is not going great for Donald Trump. Largely because of Donald Trump. 6 weeks before the election, we spent the last 4 days prior to today, and who knows what the fallout of this is going to be, but I'm sure it'll disappear. Look, nobody's talking about the July 13th assassination attempt. That is just not even in the not even part of the discussion anymore. And I'm sure that this one won't be a month from now either. But here we are 6 weeks prior to the election. We've spent the last 4 days talking about Laura Loomer, and Laura Loomer, being Laura Loomer, had to post something batshit crazy on Twitter. And normally it wouldn't matter if not for the fact that she is beside Donald Trump on a daily basis.
Is she? I didn't think she was.
Oh, yeah. She's been flying around with him in Trump Force One and, accompanying him to rallies and stuff like that. And he finally had to come out yesterday or day before yesterday and say, well, look, she's a free spirit. I don't control what she posts. That's all on her.
Good call.
She's a free spirit. She's just, she's just spitballing here. Okay, fine. Still a bit of a self-inflicted wound in the sense that Laura Loomer is crazy. She's the one that said, oh yeah, prove to me that Ron DeSantis' wife has cancer on Twitter. If you're going to hang around her and you're going to have your picture taken with her all the time, you're going to invite her over to Mar-a-Lago and she's flying with you to campaign stops, you can't just say, well, she's a free spirit and she posts whatever she wants.
Yeah.
Even if that's true, and even if you just have her around because she's a sycophant and you like having sycophants around, which I think is true.
And that's mainly why.
The fact is you have her around. Whether she has an official role in your campaign or not, when she's always hovering there in the background and always visible in frame, you got to take some responsibility for that. And you got to know that she is a liability.
Yes, she absolutely is.
And
she's a little Lulu.
And if you keep a liability around, that's not the liability's fault. That's yours.
Yeah, he's the one that always talks about, they don't fire anybody.
Yeah. And then, again, 6 weeks prior to the election, today, Donald Trump wakes up and decides this is the direction the campaign needs to go. I hate Taylor Swift. And then he went on to explain
that is so a mean girl.
Because Taylor Swift came out and said she was voting for Kamala Harris. I've said it before and I'll say it again. In any struggle, political, military, whatever, when you're engaged in that struggle, every single thing that you do either needs to increase your chances of winning that struggle or harms your opponent's ability to win that struggle. Every second that you spend doing something else is an utter and complete waste of your time. And if you're not winning, you're losing. It is a binary choice. The opinion of some pop star is so utterly irrelevant to the issues of this campaign that spending a second on Taylor Swift. And by the way, we're now going to have to talk about Taylor Swift for 5 days. Because the media will ensure that we do.
Yeah. Well, they were pushing it. This was all a big reveal. I mean, they were talking about it and putting out articles about it, and then all of a sudden Taylor swoops in and puts her stamp of approval on. I mean, that was all staged. None of that was spontaneous or an epiphany.
Sure. So you ignore it.
Right. Exactly.
You don't give it a single molecule of oxygen.
Instead, I hate Taylor Swift.
And by the way,
Cartman reaction.
Well, I mean, I wish I had a dime every time I heard this from chat. Trump being Trump, I suppose. Yeah, well, that only goes so far. If you've been in this game, politics, at this point for a decade now. And if you still can't figure out that Taylor Swift is utterly irrelevant And even if you get asked the question, what you say is Taylor Swift is a private citizen. She can choose to endorse anybody she wants. I'm here to talk about the issues that are important to the American people. Inflation, blah, 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 blah.
I'll say what I have to say to her at Puffy's white party.
Which also would be a cool answer to give. It would have the virtue of being funny anyway. But you just don't give it any oxygen. Now, again, this is another self-inflicted wound, because now this whole Taylor Swift reveal has been calculated to push this button. And Donald Trump flipped open the cover on the button to let them push it so that he could just come out with his "I hate Taylor Swift" truth on
I mean,
Truth
they
Social.
announced that they were going up to the top rope. They made a big, "Hey, I'm up here on the top rope. Here I come."
And now the press is going to talk. Well, look, this Hawaiian guy kind of threw a monkey wrench into all these plans, because we now have another squirrel to chase other than Taylor Swift. And by the way, this was what I was going to lead off with, this Trump and his inability. And I was going to, at this point, we might as well go back to the debate. He cannot help himself. There are buttons that he can push, and he has no self-awareness of knowing that when you're pushing that button, you are goading him, and he has no ability to ignore it. So Kamala Harris can say, well, it's not Donald Trump who's doing this, but she could just say, Donald Trump strangles kittens. Oh, and the crowds leave early at his rallies. And Donald Trump will be unable to address the kitten strangling allegation, because it's far more important for him to explain in detail why people don't leave early from his rallies.
Yeah, I mean, he's the ultimate mean girl. I hate Taylor Swift. That's just so fucking hilarious.
It would be so funny if it wasn't for the fact that he's giving this cackling Heridian a chance to become president of the United States.
Yeah. I don't know. I have such a hard time seeing her be able to pull this off. And with all the help she's getting, in the end, people are going to vote their pocketbook. I have to believe that. There's nothing compelling about Harris. And frankly, things just aren't getting better.
Look, the trouble is that there doesn't have to be anything compelling about her, because she's got a media that will pull her across the line. We'll never get to know her personally. We are never going to get a substantive policy forum where she lays out her views clearly, assuming that she has views and assuming that she can lay out anything clearly. We're just never going to get to see it. What we are going to get is, it's a new beginning. It's a future for all Americans. It's a campaign of joy to preserve democracy, and we're going to hear catchphrases. And it's going to be catchphrases from now until the election. And as I've said many times, people are perfectly happy to be propagandized.
Well, a lot of those, spot opinion-making panels after the debate, they did not treat her well. They actually treated Trump really well, which was surprising. And they're too smart. The panels themselves are too small to really give you anything statistically relevant. But it was interesting that the number one thing people said when evaluating Harris's performance is that, well, she says a lot of platitudes, but she doesn't have any substance. I still don't know what she's going to do.
No, neither does
how
she.
She's going to pay for it.
Neither does she. Because ask her, it was kind of funny. Somebody actually went through a list of questions from the debate that she was asked and her answer. And it was, how are you going to bring down inflation? As someone who is raised as a middle-class child, ... How would you handle the war in Ukraine? As someone raised as a middle-class child...
give them maps. ...
That and the whole thing, if I don't know what her family background is exactly. I meant to actually look it up to see whether her mother and father were divorced or...
I think they got divorced at some point. And they were both high-level college professors.
Yeah, I mean, because she keeps hitting this. Well, I was raised by a single mother.
Yeah, I was born a poor black child.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and that's all that she has to offer. But what she came there with really two goals in mind. Don't sound like a babbling idiot. So rehearse, and I'm sure that that's what they spent the week doing. Rehearse your scripted answers. Use those answers. Punch these buttons on Donald Trump and see what he does. And so all she had to do...
It was effective.
All she had to do was not look unhinged and punch buttons until Donald Trump started screaming about the Freemasons. It's the Freemasons who are, but the strawberries, that's where I had them. I proved it with geometric logic that a second key did it. And she got it. She got Captain Queeg.
But then she got greedy too with all that. What was that crap with the...
Oh, yeah, that's a tactic. She knows the camera's on her, so she wants to respond. But but some of her facial expressions were like, this is a robot that we have trained to make human expressions. And so
it was almost like that Hillary Clinton at the end of the DNC and the balloons come down.
Oh, yeah.
A real boy!
Balloons? Who would expect balloons at the end of a convention? This is a complete surprise, which I have never observed before in history. Yeah, the trouble is with... this is true of a lot of people in politics, is that they are complete sociopaths and they don't actually have real emotions. What they have is the mimicry of human action, and some are better at it than others.
Do this?
Yeah. And some are better at it than others. But I have said this to Chris. In fact, I said it I think last night. Which look, if he was trying to lose, what would he do different?
Oh, he'd come up with something.
Well, yeah, that's probably a bad question to ask. If he really wants to lose, I'm sure he can come up with something suitably outrageous.
I mean, the thing is that he's been so much more disciplined that you think, wow, man, we're so close, Donald. We can just stop these two other things. I think we can do this in a walk. But the thing is with Trump, everything's already so baked in the cake. It's already such a well-defined and known good that you can't really tinker around the edges anymore. It's what it is,
Well, that's the other thing. Look, Donald Trump is a known quantity. People who like him like him. People who don't like him don't like him. There's no surprises there, I don't think. I think the rhetoric from the Democrats that he is a direct threat to democracy and that if he's elected, as Joe Biden said, he'll be a dictator on day one. That's not helpful. And I don't think Donald Trump has been particularly effective in countering that argument. It's not enough to say that it's stupid. I mean, you should at least say, well, if I was going to do that, why didn't I do that in 2020?
Right.
Why did I leave? I clearly know what the norms are. I respect the norms. I respect the republic. So all of that's just, BS. That's not going to happen. But he doesn't respond to that
and he
well.
hasn't, he doesn't study this stuff. He's just reacting right off the cuff. And if he would just take a little bit of PR time to
Well,
just have a basic message, so you don't have to go down rabbit holes.
the thing about Donald Trump is that there are some things. Look, he approaches everything, I think, instinctually. When you say he hasn't studied this, I'm fairly sure that there is very little that Donald Trump has studied. The thing is that his immediate instincts about a lot of things tend to be pretty spot on and pretty commonsensical.
Well, he's a brawler. I mean, and he knows how to push a fight. Rhetorical negotiations, whatever it is.
Yeah, but I'm really talking more about policy. His policy instincts are generally
very, very good.
Are generally pretty good. His tariff,
yes.
And look, even with the tariff thing, and of course, being of a more libertarian bent, not a super big fan of tariffs, although, and this is something I want to talk about with you someday, and I don't care what the listeners like or not. I really actually want to have this economic discussion with you about tariffs and monetary policy and whatnot. Mm-hmm. We have to get to that, and if it bores all of the audience, well, suck it up, Buttercup. We're going to have to talk. As a campaigner, however, his instincts are almost always bad. He's occasionally good if he can get in a good one-liner. He's occasionally good, even outstanding, in a debate in the appropriate format where he's allowed to lash out with quips and stuff like that. But in general, right. He's a bad politician and he's a bad campaigner.
Yeah, right. Because he doesn't have polish, and he won't polish. It's got to be raw.
He doesn't have polish, and I think he doesn't have patience.
That too, yes.
And so from a PR point of view as a candidate, despite the fact that as president, his policy instincts were pretty good. I think we could quibble about the exact level of nice things that you have to say about Kim Jong-un or Vladimir Putin to kind of sweeten the pot for them
some
to
of his
think of
economic
you as a friend.
Policies could have used some scrutiny.
Sure, but that's populism. You're going to have to live with some of that economic populism, and you're going to have to relearn some lessons over and over again. I mean, the Democrats have to keep relearning the same lessons, although they never do. They keep repeating the same failures in terms of public policy benefits and entitlements and things like that. But nobody's going to be perfect. Ronald Reagan wasn't perfect. Nobody's going to be. But in general, his governing instincts are good. And in general, his governing instincts have been more or less in line with the Constitution. But to exercise those instincts, you got to win the election.
Mm-hmm.
And he's just not great at winning the election. And his debate performances have been inconsistent. And always have been. He's had good debates and bad debates.
Yeah, because he's not really a policy debater. Not that he can't. It's just that's just not his style. For him, it's we're going to talk shit to one another until somebody agrees that I'm right. It's kind of how he goes about it. And very few of these formats have had any kind of real debate-like format anyway. I mean, when you can't even talk to the other side, you can't ask the other side questions. There's no back and forth. That's not really a debate. That's just.
Well, actually, I would argue that it's more close to first of all, we don't have debates the way that we used to in this country. But if you were to go back to like the Lincoln and Douglas debates.
Well, yeah, if we're going to be using Robert's Rules of Order.
Yeah, I mean, that's how they are. And look, if you're on the debate team, I mean, that's largely how it's conducted. You get N number of minutes for an opening statement. Then you get n number of minutes for rebuttals back and forth. And when somebody says something in their opening statement, you don't get to jump up, from the stand on the debate stage and go, "That's a lie. That never happened." You have to wait until your turn.
Right.
And I think that the way that we've been doing debates prior to this year, where there was this give and take back and forth, I'm not sure, and I think we saw it in 2016, it does have the tendency to devolve into just a free-for-all that the moderators have to step in and say, "Okay, fine, we got to move on." So there are, pluses and minuses to it. But in the debate with Biden, happy Donald Trump showed up, and happy Donald Trump wiped the floor with him. Not that it was hard, because Joe Biden was not clearly the same Joe Biden. And the one thing I did notice about this debate that irked me more than anything else, and this is the other thing that Trump has to contend with and doesn't contend with it well, is the fact that the ABC moderators never fact-checked Kamala Harris a single time.
Not once.
Not
verifiable lies. Everybody knows they're lies.
Yeah, except for the rabid partisans.
The Charlottesville hoax, the Steele dossier. I mean, it's like
Project 2020.
Things are not real.
In a real debate with an impartial moderator, Harris would have made her opening statement, and she would have said Project 2025. And a real moderator, if they were there for fact-checking, and by the way, Donald Trump should have fact-checked this, but he didn't, because she pushed a button. And no, he didn't. He never really did talk about that Project 20. He said that was a hoax. You have to explain why. You have to explain.
No, he said that everybody knows I have nothing to do with it. I have not read it. I'm not going to read it on purpose. Got nothing to do with it.
Yeah, but
and she knows that. It's a lie.
Yeah, she knows that. And look, Muir should have said, just as a fact check, Project 2025 is not affiliated with the Trump campaign. It is a policy paper that was put out by the Heritage Foundation, a conservative think tank in Washington, D.C. Some of Trump's former advisors were part of that process, but that is not a product of the Donald Trump campaign. And Donald Trump himself should have said that. My plan is Agenda 47. Project 2025 is not part of my campaign, and it was put together by a think tank in Washington, D.C. I don't know anything about it.
Why are they so desperate to attach that to me anyway?
And I have no idea why you're trying to say that I had anything to do with it. I assume there's something in it that you don't like. Not that I would know, because I've never read it, because it's not my plan. So you can lie about Project 2025 all you want, but I had nothing to do with it, and you lying about it doesn't magically make me have something to do with it. But she didn't even get fact check on that. And she went through the entire litany of all the things that we know are not true, like the good people on both sides, where
bloodbath, like all the different stuff. It's just what?
And she got away with it. At no point did the fact check. I mean, look, I think we can argue about whether moderators to a debate should do fact checking at all, that it should be entirely the responsibility of the candidates, that the moderator is there to ask questions and demand that they keep to the time limits. And other than that, they are not part of the debate. Fact checking makes you part of the debate.
Correct.
If you're gonna fact check, then you have to fact check both sides, and you have to fact check both sides vigorously. The best thing to do would be to not fact check them at all. But if you're going to, making it obvious that you're going to, look, at one point we got into fact checking as to whether Donald Trump was using enough detectable sarcasm.
Right.
Yeah, well, I didn't catch.
I did not pick up on that, Mr. President.
I didn't pick up on that sarcasm. To which the immediate response is, your inability to detect sarcasm is a you problem, not a me problem.
It's not really my concern.
Yeah, you're supposed to be a journalist and someone who writes all the time.
Well, now, so have we gotten this affidavit released yet? Of the whistleblower?
Yeah.
alleged whistleblower.
Yeah. It's been released. You want to see
And it's got nothing in it.
it? The easiest thing to do would just be to open it up. There's no reason to speculate. I can actually pull it up on Twitter. In fact, I was looking at it before I came on. I will tell you that the initial response from Eric Erickson was LOLOLOL. But look, that's Eric Erickson. You can, trust or not trust him. I don't.
Well, to be honest, I didn't really expect much, but
I don't have a dog in that fight. But let me just do a quick search. Well, what the hell? Let me turn screen sharing on so that we can see it. And for whatever, we're not seeing it because I closed my browser window, and this is a new browser window. So there we go. And we'll just go ABC whistleblower affidavit. And I'm sure it'll come up pretty quick. Yeah, there it is, right there. So here is the ABC whistleblower. I'm not sure who to go to on this as far as the...
It's an affidavit?
First page.
Does it have is it addressed to a court? No, okay.
No.
Just the county. Okay, that's fine.
It is not. So somebody, make the following statement under penalty of perjury. I'm not sure how it's under penalty of perjury, since...
because it's basically, it means it's a sworn document.
Okay, sure. Fine. So, but it's not being submitted as evidence to anything, so...
It may be.
Yeah, and then...
And it can be now because it's a sworn document, subject to perjury.
Well, fine. So he says ABC News has gotten worse. He's been there for 10 years, and they've gotten even more biased because 10 years ago, they started to shift from unbiased reporting to a model influenced by what he calls external factors. He says he's not endorsing Donald Trump in any capacity. And then he starts talking about the debate itself, and I think I probably need to scroll down here to see the bottom of this. Oh, well, of course, he didn't scroll down, so why should I? So I think we have to go to this page. So it was signed and notarized on September 9th, prior to the debate, to ensure the allegations are formally documented prior to the debate. And he also sent a certified letter to himself, postmarked on that date. He also dispatched a FedEx package to be delivered on that date. Boy, this fella mails stuff to himself a lot. He's clearly trying to establish...
You know why they're doing it.
Yeah, you're clearly trying to establish a chain of evidence. And he sent a certified letter to Mike Johnson, the Speaker of the House. Okay, and... he says he has secretly recorded several conversations that will prove that the Harris campaign insisted upon not only the fact-checking of Donald Trump, but also insisted on what questions were not to be asked under any circumstances, or the Harris campaign would decline to participate in the debate. I make these statements under penalty of perjury, and then there is some notary public who said it was sworn before me on this 9th in the state of New York. Now, I don't know if New York is a two-party state when it comes to secretly recording conversations, but that might be relevant in the future. But that is there you go. You've seen it. Oh, wait, there was this page. The Harris campaign imposed restrictions on the scope of questioning, including no questions regarding the perceived health of Joe Biden, no inquiries related to her tenure as Attorney General. She was not Attorney General in San Francisco. She was District Attorney in San Francisco. No questions concerning her brother-in-law, Tony West, who faces allegations of embezzling billions of dollars in taxpayer funds and who may be involved in her administration if elected. I'm sure
that's kind of a big one.
Yeah, although I'm sure that they didn't say.
Never heard of that before.
Yeah, neither have I. But I'm sure that they didn't say to ABC, "You can't talk about my brother who who may have embezzled billions of
Criminal
dollars."
and corrupt guy
I think you would just say,
in
"Don't ask."
Office 701G.
Yeah, I think you just say, "I'm not going to answer any questions about my brother-in-law." So I've observed a pronounced bias against Donald Trump within ABC News. I'm shocked to learn this. The affidavit is executed to document and provide transparency regarding the issues of fairness and impartiality in the debate process. So basically, what he's saying in this affidavit is that he has secret recordings that show that the questions were given to Kamala Harris ahead of time, and she also demanded that they fact check Donald Trump and only Donald Trump, and that this whole debate was a put-up game. It's all been redacted, so we don't know who the person is. We don't know who the signature is. I do notice, and I'm not sure how other states do this, but I do know how California does this. And what is it that I don't see on this document?
A raised seal?
I do not. Well, California doesn't even require a raised seal anymore. They give you a special stamp from the state.
Yeah, but it's still... Well, whatever.
But I see neither a raised seal nor a stamp nor any indication that one has ever been there, which you would expect to see. Even a raised seal shows up on a Xerox copy. It shows up kind of shitty.
It may not have been filed anywhere, though.
Well, once the notary public notarizes it, they have to put their seal on it. There's no seal here. Or in California, their stamp on it. That stamp has to be right next to their signature. That's the law. Now, I don't know what New York's law is. I don't pretend to, but I would assume that they would have something similar, that on this page, I would need to see that seal co-located.
Does it say
with her
seal
signature.
under her name?
No, it says sworn to me on this 9th.
I mean, under her signature.
Notary Public.
Seal anywhere?
Notary Public, State of New York, and then redacted.
No. The signature of whoever was giving ID to the Notary Public.
Well, it says, I, my name, being duly sworn, hereby deposes and says, the deponent has read the foregoing affidavit, vows to the content thereof. Same is true to deponent's own knowledge as to the matter therein to be stated, to be alleged upon information and belief, and as those matters deponent believes them to be true.
See, you could not ask for a more straightforward sentence than that. It gives you everything in the fewest amount of words.
Try reading that. But again, there's no notary public seal on this document.
But there may not have to be if the Notary Republic's signature line says seal after it. It's an old Commonwealth thing.
Okay, well, it looks like a signature line, and there does not appear to be enough space between the signature that we can see and just the words Notary Public, State of New York.
But the Notary Republic did sign it.
Someone signed it above the words Notary Public, but there's no seal on this. Look, in California, I don't believe this would be a valid document. There is no notary stamp next to the signature. Therefore, this
they just
document
have to stamp it before they actually file it.
This document has not been notarized. No, it has to be.
So it has not been filed.
It has to be stamped on the day that it is notarized.
Yeah.
You may have to stamp it again when you file it, but that would be the court, not the notary public.
You proved that, Kojak.
Okay. Well, then I would have to
I
go
don't believe this was stamped.
Okay, fine. I'd have to go to look, again, it's New York, so I don't know what New York's equivalent of the California Business and Professions Code says about notary publics, but in California, a notary public has to stamp and sign. Signing without a stamp is not
typically
notarization.
That is exactly how it's supposed to work. I'm just telling you.
Okay, and well, there's no stamp here, so I don't know what to tell you.
But it doesn't mean it's fake. It just means, in the very least, it hasn't been filed yet.
Yeah. So,
And it doesn't really say a whole lot anyway when you think about it.
no.
Other than that, it promises that there are recordings.
Yeah. And that's
Again,
basically,
this is the big reveal.
that's
We're
basically,
getting set up.
I have secretly recorded several conversations. I have in my hand the name of 300 communists in the State Department. You can believe
And
as
this
much as
manila envelope is information that could lead to the arrest of Hillary Clinton.
Yeah, exactly. So that's the affidavit, which, as far as I can tell, hasn't fully been notarized. Oops, I did not mean to hit that button. I meant to hit that button. So as far as I can tell, it hasn't been formally notarized because there's no stamp. Again, I don't know how New York works. But in California, if you're going to sign it as a notary, you have to stamp it. You have to put your stamp on it. In fact, I think you have to sign in the stamp, if I remember right.
The stamp typically has the number on it.
Yeah, but is this real? I don't know.
I mean, is it earth-shattering? No.
No, here's the thing though. I would have no difficulty. I mean, we all know, and even she has come out and said later, I really regret having done it. But we all know that Donna Brazile
right,
gave the debate questions to Hillary Clinton a week prior to the debate.
Was I not supposed to do that? Is that look down on here or around here?
Yeah, am I not supposed to do that?
Whoops. Because if I had known, I would have chosen a totally different path.
Yeah. Look, if you ask me, do you think it's possible that ABC gave Kamala Harris a heads up on all the questions that they were going to ask in the debate? I would say unreservedly, I believe that is perfectly possible.
Even probable.
I would not only not.
Think that there's?
I would not only not.
A very high chance of finding evidence that proves exactly that.
Yeah, I mean, not only would I not put it above ABC to do so, I would, in fact, be more surprised to learn that they had not done so than that they had. That's how little trust I have for ABC and how little trust I have for Kamala Harris's integrity.
Lindsay, I was going over our performance here in the debate. I see a couple times where we screwed up, and I think we really owe it to the American people to set this straight. What say you, Lindsay?
So I just don't know. This is my problem. I just don't know how to predict. And I had the same problem, I guess, in 2020. I just don't know how to predict how this goes.
2012 was the one that kind of blew me away. That was the one where it was just like, okay, crappy economy, all these metrics, they've never failed before, blah, 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 blah. And then we watched the returns and we're like, okay, well, everything we thought we knew, it's just...
Yeah, everything we thought we knew was wrong.
And now I don't know what's going on. So,
I mean, at least in 2016, I was a little discouraged going into that election, but I always kept, alive the hope that Hillary Clinton was a historically unpopular presidential candidate. And she had been historically unpopular at that point for nearly 20 years, well, more than 20 years, I guess, because, I mean, in 1992, her first real appearance before the public was with the the bimbo explosion in the 92 campaign. And she said, I
Bimbo
could,
eruption.
yeah, bimbo eruption. Yeah. I could have been like Tammy Wynette. You expect me to be like Tammy Wynette and stand by your man, which everybody took as kind of an insulting reference to, the rubes and hayseeds in the South. And she became even more
Of which
unpopular.
Bill Clinton is one.
Yeah, and she became even more unpopular whenever we got into the White House travel affair and her hand in that and the whole. I mean, she has been deeply unpopular. Her negatives, she's always had hovered at 50-50, with 50% having a very negative opinion of her. So going into that election, I always held out the hope that, what? People don't like her. Enough people cannot like her to swing this. And as it turned out, that swing came pretty early, and Donald Trump got elected. 2020, 2020 never looked good to me for Donald Trump. And while I hoped the American people would see through Joe Biden for the empty suit that he is and always has been, I was wrong. And so now, here we are, 2024, and an even emptier suit than Joe Biden is running as the Democratic nominee. Will she
Who has never once won a single primary vote to run for president? Not once.
Not once, and has never really had to be vetted. And will the American people take a chance and elect her? I fear that they will.
I can't see it. I just can't see it. At some point, probably tomorrow, she's going to say something really stupid again, do something really stupid. She's riding her momentum and she thinks that she's got something going on. I think she and Tim Walz show who they really are. People are they're not happy with them. They don't like them.
That's my hope. And my hope is that sometime in the next 6 weeks that she and Tim Walz and that prize of a wife that Tim Walz is carting around finally say something that make people wake up and go, what? I mean, I saw somebody say something on Twitter. One of the problems with Kamala Harris is that she believes things that are so batshit crazy that when you tell voters, this is what Kamala Harris said, they just don't believe you.
Right. You must be lying. That's too crazy. Ha ha ha.
I mean, her secret weapon may be that she is too crazy to be believed.
Kind of like the Zaphod Beeblebrock.
Yes, Zaphod Beeblebrox from Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. And look, from chat, there are so many living in la la land. They are literally clueless. And, that's always the problem with presidential elections. At least in midterm elections, the people who show up to vote, even though it's generally much smaller than the number of people who show up in the general election, the people who show up to vote in midterm elections are the kind of people that at least keep one eye on politics occasionally and have some...
Especially local politics, because that's what you're really voting for there.
Yeah, and it's the general election where the people who never pay attention to politics all of a sudden wake up sometime in the end of September or the first part of October and go, okay, well, let's see, who do I think I want to vote for president? And they make their decisions based on not entirely rational factors as far as I can tell.
Some might even call them similar factors to how they chose who was going to be on their fantasy football team that week. You pick and grab at information that makes sense to you. I mean, and let's face it, we get a very skewed sense of how much time and thought and worry people put into any kind of political issue. You know, we think about it all the time. We're always paying attention when something new happens, and how this might affect that and that and blah blah blah. Most people are like, okay, I
Look,
got to drop Susie off here. I got to do that. I got to
yeah.
make some more money.
But look, we're the kind of weirdos that even if you asked us about a policy that we'd never heard of before, we've done enough thinking about
Probably figured it out.
about the fundamental principles that we hold politically that we could derive an agreement or disagreement with a proposed policy from the basis of principle.
Right.
The number of people who A, know what their political principles are, and B, could enunciate them with enough clarity to themselves to use them to reason from the general principle to a particular policy are probably pretty small.
I would agree. And that's why I the biggest problem I have with how largely government has seeped into our individual decision making lives is because if they're going to do that, then we do have to pay attention to what they're doing. That's a malign influence from outside. It's exogenous. I don't know if I agree with that. I would like to keep thinking my way first before I allow anything else in.
People,
And
though, have become so comfortable with government doing stuff that it becomes their first
yeah,
response.
and that's the problem. It's the old bait and switch, right? You know, oh, you like these shiny things, huh? Oh, just take the, I'll make it cheap for you. But you're gonna love those shiny things. I'm gonna offer you more, and then I'm gonna own everything else you have too. So it's it's just it's like the angler fish with that little lamp over its head.
Yeah, exactly.
Here's your shiny thing.
Here's your shiny thing. Go for it. And once you grab it, there's no way out.
You're stuck. I mean, we literally have such good information on this now. When you think about from like a economic history sort of stance, is we have lots and lots of metrics. We have seen how policies play out. We have seen how even the most generous and lovingly motivated policies have consequences that a lot of times are the exact opposite of what we're trying to accomplish. So let's figure out a different way to do it. Stop doing it that way.
Yeah. But most people don't think about their politics that way.
That's right.
Who was it that famously said back in the 90s or early 2000s that, people select a president based on who they'd most like to have a beer with?
Yeah, that was like it wasn't George Will. No, it's the Dave Barry, right? Wasn't it Dave Barry?
It may have been. I don't remember who it was, which is why I said whoever it was that said
It
that.
was some like a one of the I guess they used to call them humorists back in the 1900s. Back in the 1900s. Dale, remember back in the 1900s?
Yeah, I'm old enough to actually start making it sound like that. Well, back in the 1970s, like some old miner from the gold rush.
Found a whole mess of 8 tracks out in the back of Larry's Leisure Town. Oh yeah, good times back in the 70s.
Yeah. So there are so many people who I think are willing to just go along with, yeah, Donald Trump's a bad guy. He's nasty. He's mean. And he got convicted of something, I think. So,
Right.
yeah, Kamala Harris. And if you don't know anything about Kamala Harris, she's doing what Joe Biden did in 2020. Hello, yep. I am insert generic Democrat here. And as long as she's running as generic Democrat, unless she and or Tim Walz, or preferably both, come out and just start saying some of this stuff that by the way they've said in the past. And this is the other thing that really gets me. And people try to do this on social media, but so much of social media is just preaching to the choir. You're the only people who see your stuff are people who agree with you. You can look at the stuff that she said. That's the thing. She says this stuff like, I'll use executive action to take your guns away, which she doesn't have any power to do. She can't do. And as far as I can tell, would not be allowed to do. And she actually, as far as I can tell, at least in 2020, I mean, she did say that on the debate stage. I mean, even Joe Biden said, you can't do that. That's unconstitutional. But she clearly.
But I like your style. We should work together.
Yeah, but I like your style. You should be my vice president. You crazy nut. So people try to get that stuff out. Does it land with the people it needs to land with? I don't know.
I mean,
and look, when
it's hard. It's so hard to say because, first of all, you don't even know what they're actually hearing. They're hearing, I mean, real life telephone, right? It's like, oh, I heard he's gonna buy everybody ice cream every Sunday, and then we all get a free house and free cars. And somebody out there probably does believe that, but it doesn't matter. It's such a it really is such a tired and cliche way to buy votes now. It's cartoonish. Is what it is. Look at all the free stuff I'm going to give you.
Yeah, well, at $35 trillion in debt, the free stuff train is about to come to a juddering halt at the station.
And why would you want to be left holding the bag when that happens? That's the part I can never. It's the whole predatory pricing thing. It's like, yeah, okay, predatory price, but at some point I've got to make back the money that I lost. How am I going to do that if nobody will pay for anything? Because it's so expensive now.
At the end of the day, it always comes down, certainly in politics, it always comes down to power. The kind of people that politics attracts are the kind of people that want to control your life. They've convinced themselves that they can run your life better than you can, you ignorant hayseed. And it's the I'm going to bring together two important historical references. One is John Milton's Paradise Lost, where Satan says, I would rather reign in hell than serve in heaven.
Right.
And from Batman, it is, what's his name? The old fellow that's Batman's butler, who was played by Michael Caine.
Not
Archibald Alfred. Alfred to Batman. Alfred in this case being Michael Caine, saying some men just want to watch the world burn.
Right.
And I was listening to Hardcore History from Dan Carlin, and he made a similar statement. Some men will burn the world to rule over the ashes.
Absolutely true.
And
they even have like pop psychology terms from this, and even real psychology terms for this.
Yeah, and that's what it all comes down to. It's power. I'm going to taunt. I'm going to taunt. I don't even say taunt. I'm going to tempt you. That's probably a better word. I'm going to tempt you with some attempt to buy your vote. I'll forgive all your college loans. I'll give you a universal basic income. I'll ensure that there's 100% employment and that everyone in the Soviet Union will have a job.
Enemies.
Yeah,
In order to pay for it all, I'll tear down whoever you think is socially worthless.
and all you have to do is give me absolute control over every aspect of your life.
I just want $1 trillion. That's all I want.
Yeah,
You can keep the rest.
yeah, exactly. But that's what it comes down to. You really are making a deal with the devil. Oh, I'll get my free shit. Yeah, sure, there's going to be some free shit. Soviet Union had free health care. So does Cuba today. Yeah, for all the free health care that you can get. And
Yep.
the key phrase there
All
is
the free 1935 hair.
yeah, that you can get, assuming that that amount is anything above zero. Good luck.
Mm-hmm.
And people seem willing to make that deal. And I think more people are willing to make that deal now than would have made it 20 years ago. In fact, I think it's substantially more. And so, as I mentioned earlier, and we kind of alighted past it, I don't know that we're going to have another election after this one. At least not.
That's what I was saying.
At least not
I've been
in this
saying that
country.
forever.
Although, I mentioned that to Chris earlier today, and she said, yeah, I think that if Donald Trump gets elected, there'll be all kinds of bad things that happen. But I don't think that people on the right, if Kamala Harris gets elected, I don't think they'll do a damn thing.
You know what? We may have reached last straw territory, rather. When you think about it, by 2004, the election of 2000 was a low enough blow to our supposed sacred democratic norms that the left holds so dear. 2004 wasn't much better. The only reason 2008 gave us a reprieve because it was like, oh, black guy's gonna win. Yep, we know the black guy's gonna win. He's gonna win. We already know. You know what? Let's go with it.
Yeah, but look, 2000.
And every single other contest has been completely contested since we entered this century.
That is true. I mean, I kind of put 2000 in a special category. I mean, that was really the last of the truly normal elections we had. We had a 50-50 country. We didn't really know if we wanted to keep the Bill Clinton thing going by electing Al Gore or go in a different direction, because after all, we'd had the Democrats in charge for 8 years. Things had gone okay. Things had gone pretty well. We'd had a lot of economic growth, but it was Bill Clinton. He had his
biggest
issues.
Explosion of productivity that we had had.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it was more to do with the proliferation of computer technology than anything that Bill Clinton did. But at the end of the day, that was a close election. Yeah, it came down to Florida because Florida had about the shittiest election system that you could have imagined at that time.
That's right. Yes.
At that time, because there are plenty of shittier ones now, apparently. But at that time, it was a horrible election system. And look, to Florida's credit, immediately after that election, they completely revamped their election. And
they were very embarrassed by that whole ordeal.
And what we will see on election night is that Florida will count millions of votes, and they'll be done by midnight, 1 o'clock in the evening. And we will know.
Not earlier. Well, they have 2 time zones, so.
Well, that's true. But we will know definitively what happened in Florida on election night.
Yes.
We will not know that in Wisconsin.
California, in Pennsylvania, Michigan.
Wisconsin. Yeah, we're not going to.
Probably Georgia.
Illinois.
Uh-huh.
We're just not going to know.
How many you guys got?
Yeah, but 2000 was kind of a normal election. It only became controversial because it was split right down the middle, and Florida was the deciding state. And there were only,
In 2004, yeah.
I'm sorry, in
I mean,
2000,
2000.
there were only 614 votes, I believe, was the actual number that we finally came out with after they did all the recounting.
It was small. I remember that.
It was like 600 votes. I mean, in a state the size of Florida, that's a big deal. 2004, we had the whole Iraq and Afghanistan thing over everybody's heads. I think nobody was going to be willing to jump horses in midstream.
Nobody wanted to rock that boat. And they ran a horrible candidate.
Barack Obama, 2008, he was going to be a shoo-in. 2012, Mitt Romney. I mean, if you give people the choice between a fake Democrat and a real Democrat, the real Democrat's going to win every time.
Right.
Now, it is interesting to note.
Even, I mean, the most milquetoast character you could possibly have. And this is what the RNC kept pushing and pushing.
But I think nobody really came out and disputed the results of 2008 and 2012. There were a lot of people who were disappointed, but I don't think anybody really came out and said, "Oh, this is
2008." No, and that was a given.
But
2012
cheating, 2004. The Democrats were complaining about Diebold voting machines, which, by the way, 2004, the only year that we used Diebold voting machines here in California. So there were,
we can remember 2010 too with the IRS scandal.
Yeah,
and then
that's true.
2012 presidential election year, and then we had the whole 9/11 scandal.
Right, but I think it was 2016 where the election denial really kicked into full scale craziness.
It was certainly, yeah. I guess Gore played a little more footsie with it, and he made his forays, but in the end, he kind of did the right thing. He had to have his feet held to the fire.
Yeah, and look, Democrats are...
But Hillary Clinton was just, you're right, just was like, it was stolen.
Yeah, 2016 was the first year where it was literally, this election was stolen. I mean,
right.
At least in 2000, Democrats had a point that it did go to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court made a decision that they probably didn't want to make, but they were kind of forced to, which, I think Al Gore.
Still pissed about that.
You're the ones who asked for it. You got the decision. Maybe next time, try something different. But 2016, Hillary Clinton went full on. This was stolen. It was the damn Russians, because, if a Russian...
She still is saying this stuff, too. She hasn't changed her tune whatsoever.
Because some 83-year-old Mima in Omaha, Nebraska posted a Facebook meme. Well, that's the Russians. That's what lost me the election.
Holy crap, we can trace it all. This one cornfield in Nebraska.
But then Donald Trump in 2020 never accepted that he lost that election. I think 2020 is way more complex than we can cover. I think the way
it is.
I think
suffice it to say, we don't have any solid proof it was compromised, but we don't actually have a whole lot of proof that it wasn't.
Well, the problem is we don't have a lot of provenance for where all of these millions of ballots came from.
Yeah, and there was just too many convenient things that happened. All
of a sudden, Donald Trump wins more votes than he got in 2000, but Joe Biden gets 81 million votes. Where did this, it almost looked like one of those socialist countries with the 98% turnout. Where are all these extra voters coming from?
An entirely new county has been discovered. Didn't know it existed. But it turns out they all voted for El Presidente.
Yeah, but we got their ballots, and Lord knows we can't ignore your ballots, because once we have them, the ballots are presumptively accurate. Whether somebody dumped off a whole bunch of ballots in the middle of the night in a drop box, who knows? Maybe, maybe not. We don't know. We're certainly not going to check. We're just going to count them as
They might not even be being marked. I don't know.
Yeah, well, the nice thing about just saying, well, just drop your ballots off in any box anywhere, and we'll just count them. The nice thing is that it relieves you from the responsibility of having to come up with a whole bunch of ballots yourselves that are all pre-marked so that you can just feed them into the machines when you've already got all the pre-marked ballots already sent in via drop boxes that you're going to accept without sure. So we got, I don't remember what the number was, but it's something like 10 more million people voted in 2020 than voted in 2016.
Yeah. And that includes several jurisdictions, one of them being Philadelphia, another being a little place just outside of Atlanta. It's part of the Atlanta metro area. You might have heard of it. But they tend to have well over 100% of the voting electorate vote.
Yeah, I think there was one.
Which is, I mean, that's some spirit right there, baby.
And I think there was a couple of, at least one county in Michigan, not Michigan, Illinois. And Illinois has same-day voter registration. So
Right.
They ended up with like 106% of pre-election voter registration.
Yeah.
So basically that's 6% of the electorate registered to vote on election day.
Paul,
Okay,
George,
sure.
Ringo.
Okay, yeah, sure. Whatever. And look, Donald Trump has a point that there were a lot of problems with that election. And whether the election
Provable points.
Yeah, provable points.
No
Yeah, because but the problem is that by the time Donald Trump walked into a federal court to say, "Hey, this is all wrong," it was too late.
Yeah, and that's something that I one of the things it is absolutely true that all these cases that were brought were thrown out of court. But why would they weren't thrown out on any kind of substantive, based on the merits of the arguments?
No, not a one of them. It was either standing.
Every single one of them was administrative. Yeah, you actually can't file that here. We can't provide you a remedy. You're not even stating a case that I can put on the docket. So, and that's legitimate. You've got to actually be able to do that. But there's been no. Actually, that's not true. In the few cases that were allowed to remain on the docket, I could think of a couple in Pennsylvania and one in, I think, Michigan and Wisconsin as well, brought by the Trump administration. They won all of them. Yes, the Supreme Court of the state, being sued and eventually agreed. Yes. This is a legislative responsibility of the executive branch, took that away, and they acted ultra vires. Therefore, none of these regulations are real. They cannot be forced on you, and they cannot be upheld. So we've seen a lot of those types of rulings.
Yeah, but those
you don't hear about them in the news very often.
Yeah, but those were cases that should have been bought well prior to the election, whenever those new rules were being promulgated.
To the extent you could, because you remember what happened was, that is true, and that's something that the GOP has been very bad about, while the DNC is actually really good about getting ahead on bringing these lawsuits. One of the problems, though, is that this was during the pandemic, and all of a sudden an election board would decide, yeah, we're just going to change how it's all done because, there's a pandemic, emergency powers, blah, 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 blah. And while they got sued, the courts, more often than not, a lot more often than not, said, well, we can't do anything now. We think it's more harmful, basically, to stop this election from going forward than to risk some mistakes. So, again, well, every time Trump sued about this, he lost. Padding stats, right? I mean, it doesn't.
Yeah. But most
We don't actually get a real resolution to the real problem.
Yeah, and the trouble with that argument is that whenever, and the Democrats say this all the time, well, 46 cases and you lost all of them.
Mm-hmm.
No, you didn't lose them. In many of those cases, the court basically said
you don't even have a case.
You don't
it's
have
not coming.
You don't have standing.
Right.
You don't have standing to bring this case, or there's no remedy that we can give you. This is not the proper venue, whatever it was. And so, yeah, those cases got dropped, but as you said earlier, largely on administrative grounds. The idea that Donald Trump was, or that election fraud was disproven in those court trials is absolutely is absolutely untrue. You're giving the impression that cheating was disproved,
right?
But the merits were never really considered in any of those cases.
They were never considered. I think they were in one. There was one actual substantive case. I think it was in Michigan, and it was about some poll worker or something. But for the most part, all these cases that were being brought in November and early December were thrown out on procedural grounds because, I mean, truth be told, I kind of sympathize with the courts. I mean, what is it you think we can do? You know, I can give you a ruling, but what's going to happen after that?
Yeah, what are we going to do? Are we going to do a read? And, you know, Trump was even asking this at one point. You know, we need to redo the whole election. I'm sorry, that's just not going to happen. Nobody.
And I don't want it to do that.
And certainly no state court has the power just to unilaterally declare by fiat. The Texas State Supreme Court says we must have a new national election and do a redo of November 7th. We don't have a mechanism for that.
Yeah.
And it's certainly not something that state courts can do. And states.
No, and that's not the way it's supposed to work.
And by the way, states run their own elections.
That's right. Because it's the United States of America.
It's like you can walk into
each state gets a say in who governs us.
Yeah, it's not like you can walk into federal court and say, "Hey, we need a do-over," because the federal court can't force state legislatures to agree to a do-over. There's just the remedies all have to be beforehand. But the problem is,
and that was all the problem that was why so of the vast majority of those cases were thrown out. It was like, look, you make a great argument. I probably even agree with you on some level, but there's nothing in here that empowers me to be able to do anything about it.
But but on the other hand, isn't that a crazy system? I mean, at the end,
and that's what brought it to light. It's like, yeah, it seems like maybe there should be a way to.
Yeah, I mean, we have a system that just assumes nobody's going to cheat. And therefore, we're never going to have to redo elections. We're never going to have to look at election results. We're never going to have officials throw stuff out. This system is all just going to work because we can trust it. And at no point did anyone ever say, okay, what happens if there... And by the way, it makes election fraud, which technically is a crime, but it does make it easier to do. Because the chances of you getting caught, I mean, unless you do something egregious, and it generally takes them a couple of years to find that you did it, even if you do something egregious, chances are you're not going to get caught at all. It's just one of those areas that we have this big this big void where what happens if there is massive cheating in an election? What do we do? How do we fix that? What are the remedies? I don't know.
And we can't pull, once the vote is mixed in with the other votes, it could be completely fraudulent, but we don't have any way of figuring that out.
Yeah, that's the thing. If you say, well, you can just drop off all your ballots at drop boxes and we'll just pick them up and count them.
And that's what is done. And, well, once it gets into the system, you can't back it out again. There's no unique identifiers.
Yeah, there's no way.
And I'm not arguing for unique identifiers because that's the last thing I want on my vote.
Yeah, but how do I know which of these votes is a real vote and which is a fake one. I don't
And you
know.
can't.
I have a ballot. It's been filled out.
Right.
Okay, somebody signed the front. And what am I going to do? Compare the signatures manually for, let's say I have 10 million voters in my state, or 5. Look, even if you only have 5 million or 3, or even if you're Montana and there's only 250,000. I mean, the time it takes to compare 250,000 with the 3 guys that work for the state election commission in a state of that size, it's going to take a long time. And we'll never know the results by December 19th. So once these fraudulent ballots get into the system, hey, we've done our job. And we made it super easy in 2020 for people just to dump off fraudulent ballots. Did anybody do it? I don't know. Maybe not. How would I know?
Well, and nobody's looked.
No, because if you look, you're liable to find something you don't want to see.
Essentially, right.
But again,
that's not true. I guess you had Dinesh D'Souza and the 200 Mules and all that stuff. So there's been some tinkering in there.
Yeah, but even Dinesh D'Souza's film, 200 Mules, at the end of the day, when you look at it, he didn't actually find anybody that he could point to.
It's still not enough to actually prove anything. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the problem.
It makes election cheating way easier than it needs to be. The obvious solution to that is no absentee ballots, no voting by mail, unless there is some legally specified reason that you can request an absentee ballot. Other than that, you got to show up and you got to vote. Not even a big fan of early voting, but look, if you want to have an election week, so you give people a week, I don't know why, like in Georgia, they give you like a month. I'm not sure why you need a month, and I'm not sure.
Some places is like 2 months.
Yeah, I'm not sure that's a great idea. I think a week is long enough. And look, make Election Day a national holiday. We've already got 14. Let's round it off to a nice 15. And let's make Election Day a national holiday so that nobody has to work. And if you are going to have early voting, hey, you can have early voting up to a week prior to the election. But you are going to have to show up and vote. Oh, and by the way, when you show up and vote, you are going to have to present an ID that says you are an American citizen.
Right. I mean, this is basically what the SAVE Act says.
Yeah, I mean, you have to be able to preserve electoral integrity. And this whole thing with just willy-nilly, and by the way, California, they would prefer that you not show up and vote. California would prefer that you vote by mail.
See, that's what worries me. And there's a reason I won't do it. I get the argument from both sides. It's an option. If they're going to bank their votes, we got to bank our votes. Okay. I mean, I understand. I mean, it is a system.
Yeah,
but
I don't understand.
What I'm afraid of is I'm going to go do it. And then now they're in control of my vote all the way until voting day. And like, I'd rather hold on to the control of that until the actual voting day. And that's just a me thing. I don't see the necessity to turn it over early.
Yeah, because
I just find that there's going to be problems with that.
The longer that they have your ballot,
right,
the more chance somebody has of, doing something, because you no longer have control over it. And so I believe in election day voting in person, showing ID. If you are sick or something like that, or you have some sort of hardship, fine.
You got called out of town. Yeah, right.
Yeah. Send off for an absentee ballot, and for some small percentage of people, they can vote by absentee. But make Election Day a holiday, and you show up and you vote on Election Day and you show ID. That's the only way.
It really should be a holiday.
Yeah, that's the only way. And by the way, this whole idea And I don't know. We have computers and everything. All these ballots are generally electronic ballots of one kind or another, even if they're just the Opta reader ballots. Why does it take 3-4 days to count these ballots? How can some, third world hellhole hold an election with millions of people voting with pencil and paper? And
I was going to say, let's just go back to pencil and paper. I guarantee you it'll be faster.
yeah, how are they able to tabulate their electoral results and we can't do it here? All of this stuff makes me think that there is shenanigans going on.
And it has to be.
And it irks me that I can't point to a shenanigan. I can point to shenanigan-like things that are suspicious, but there's no
shadows and penumbras of shenanigans.
Yeah, I can't point to something and go shenanigans. And if you do point to something and say shenanigans, then what happens? As far as I can tell, not much.
Nothing. Yeah.
Because
but that doesn't matter. It's not enough to affect the election. There's over 4 million people in Wisconsin who are ineligible voters on the rolls. Wisconsin has about 3.5 million actual eligible voters.
Yeah.
How is this not a problem? I mean, it's just...
Look...
People can pretend all they want, but we know what's going on, and that's the problem. It's like, okay, I'm going to accept your arguendo. No, fuck
no,
that.
I'm not going to
accept. No, you're lying.
No, there's no arguendo. If you don't want people to show their IDs, if you don't want to clean your voter rolls on a regular basis, and by regular I mean every election, at least every 2 years, and purge your voter rolls, if you don't want to do those two simple things, I can only assume that it's because you want to cheat.
Yes.
And so
that's exactly right. I mean, let's just go to simple cui bono.
Exactly.
Who's getting the benefit here?
If every time I come up with an idea to make elections more secure, and you have some principled objection to that, I have to assume it's because you want to cheat. And the thing is, that makes me look like the freaking lunatic because I can't point at you and go shenanigans. Because you know the system well enough to know how to cheat and not get caught. And it depends on having these loopholes. So, hey, I've got, N number of dead or ineligible voters on the rolls. Am I going to take them off? No. Okay, there's no reason for you to say no
them yet.
Unless you plan to vote.
Right. Hey, that's the only reason. And the thing is, it happens every election cycle. Local elections, statewide, nationwide, whatever. It doesn't matter. They use these same tactics over and over and over and over again.
Yeah, and
they're not new. We know how it works.
And here's the thing. There's always some low IQ moron who does the most obvious type of election cheating and the most easiest way to get caught. And they inevitably do get caught and convicted. And the trouble with that is, A, you can always catch the morons. But B, the people who don't want all of these extra rules that would increase the security of elections, they point at that moron who did the dumbest thing ever and got caught, and they say, see, the system works.
Nobody can get away with it.
Yeah, you try to cheat, we'll catch you. You'd go to jail just like that.
Aaron, nobody goes to jail unless they really want to go to jail. Yeah. He went to jail because he was sick of to listen to her.
Karen. But yeah, so there's no way to win that argument.
No. Because you've already convinced yourselves. There is no argument being had. It's just, hey, reality. No.
Yeah, and
Okay.
and if you try, because look at what happened in Georgia after 2020, right? Georgia went in and said, okay, fine. Brian Kemp said, we're going to change the system. We're going to redo it, and we are going to have a voter ID law in Georgia. Well,
That's fantastic.
Jim Crow back from the 1960s. He's re-implementing segregation. The only reason that you want voter ID in Georgia is because you don't want the black people to vote. And that gets trotted out as surely as the night follows the day. And yet, as we know in Georgia, black voting has increased substantially since the implementation of that rule. But that's not important. The important thing is to prevent someone else from doing it. So we're going to go back to well, you're just a racist who hates black people and don't want them to vote. That's always going to be the argument. But I'm just saying, if you tell me that I can't increase the integrity of the electoral system, I'm just going to assume it's because you're a cheater and that you have a vested interest in fraudulent elections. And
yeah, I think Occam's razor is incredibly appropriate right now.
Yeah,
for everything. Instead of trying to think about it, well, what makes the most sense? Yeah. Maybe you got a little self-interest there, buddy.
Yeah, and the other reason why you always want on-time election day in-person voting is because it doesn't give you a month or two to figure out how many votes you need to bank in the mail-in system ahead of time based on the polling. Anyway, Michael, we're done. Have a great week. We'll talk to you next week.
We'll see you, bud.
And for everybody else, you've been watching the Observations Podcast for the 15th of September, 2024. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. We'll talk to you next time. So long.